Manager pretended to be poor and went to his store. But what they did to him? Marcus Thompson's heart was racing as he looked at himself in the bathroom mirror of his home. For 3 days, he hadn't been able to sleep properly after receiving that anonymous letter accusing him of allowing discrimination in his store. As the manager of Royal Elegance, one of the most luxurious department stores in New York, he had always prided himself on maintaining the highest standards of service. But now, dressed in old, dirty clothes he had bought from a thrift store, Marcus was about to discover the truth about what was really happening in his own company. His hands trembled as he rubbed dirt on his face and messed up his hair. The 42-year-old man had never imagined he would one day be disguising himself like this. Marcus had built his career from scratch, starting as a salesperson and climbing each step with sweat and dedication. Now, for the first time in 15 years as manager, he was questioning whether he really knew his employees. The anonymous letter had arrived the previous Monday, handwritten on plain paper. The words still echoed in his mind like hammer blows. "Mr. Marcus, do you know how your employees treat poor people? Go to your store in disguise and discover the truth. You will be shocked by what you see." All week, Marcus tried to ignore the letter, convincing himself it was just a tasteless prank. After all, he had always instructed his team to treat all customers with respect and courtesy. He was sure his employees followed his guidelines to the letter, but the more he thought about it, the more restless he became. He began to observe his team's behavior more closely, and some small things he had never noticed began to jump out at him. A look of disdain here, a whispered comment there, small signs that had perhaps always been there, but which he had never perceived. Marcus left home at 7 in the morning, 2 hours earlier than usual. He wanted to arrive at the store even before the employees and observe everything from the beginning. He walked through the streets of downtown New York, feeling strange in those clothes. People on the street looked at him differently, some with pity, others with poorly disguised disgust. It was a typical Tuesday morning in March, with that morning chill that would soon be replaced by New York heat. Marcus arrived in front of his store at 7:30, pretending to be just another homeless person looking for a place to warm up. He sat on the sidewalk, leaning against the wall, and watched. The first employees began to arrive at 8 o'clock. Marcus knew each of them by name, knew about their families, their personal problems, their dreams, or at least he thought he did. Several passed by him without even looking in his direction. Some changed their path to avoid him. At 8:30, Jennifer Davis, one of the store's longest-serving salespeople, hurried past. She had always been one of the most polite and helpful employees Marcus knew, but when she saw the ragged man sitting there, her expression changed completely. She quickened her pace and hurried into the store. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. Had it always been like this? Had he been blind to what was happening right under his nose? At 9 o'clock sharp, the store opened. Marcus waited a few more minutes before getting up and walking toward the entrance. His dirty, bare feet left marks on the polished marble floor. The contrast was stark. His store was a symbol of luxury and elegance, and now he was there, looking anything but that. Right at the entrance, 2 security guards intercepted him. David and Michael, 2 men Marcus had personally hired 3 years ago. Both were family men, honest workers he respected and trusted. "Hey, you there, stop right where you are," said David, the older of the 2, placing his hand on Marcus's chest to stop him from entering. "Good morning," Marcus replied in a hoarse voice, trying to disguise his usual tone. "I would like to enter the store." Michael laughed mockingly. "Enter the store? Look at the state you're in, man. This store isn't for you. There's a discount mall over on the corner. Go there." "But I have money," Marcus insisted, showing some crumpled bills he had prepared. "I want to buy some new clothes." "Oh, really? And where did you get that money, huh?" David moved closer, his tone threatening. "You didn't steal it, did you?" Marcus felt anger rising, but he controlled himself. He was there to observe, not to cause trouble. "No, sir, I work collecting recyclables. I saved up some money, and I want to buy something new." "Listen to this, Michael. The beggar wants to buy designer clothes," David mocked, raising his voice so other employees could hear. "What's next? You gonna want to try on a $3,000 suit?" Other employees began to approach, drawn by the commotion. Marcus saw Jennifer approaching, along with Rachel, a younger saleswoman who had been hired the previous year. There was also Sarah, who had worked in the cosmetics section for almost 10 years. "What's going on here?" asked Rachel, looking at Marcus with poorly disguised disgust. "This guy wants to enter the store," explained Michael. "Says he has money to buy clothes." Rachel laughed. "Really? Look at him. He probably hasn't showered in weeks. He'll contaminate the whole store with that filth." Marcus felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. These were the people he considered his second family, people he cared about, whom he had always treated with respect and kindness. How could they be so cruel? "Please," Marcus insisted, trying to stay calm. "I just want to look at some clothes. I promise I won't get anything dirty." "You won't get anything dirty?" Jennifer spoke for the first time, and her voice was laden with contempt. "Do you see the state you're in? This store caters to a select clientele. I can't let you come in here and scare away our real customers." "Real customers?" Marcus repeated, feeling his heart break. "I'm a person too. I have rights as well." "Rights?" David laughed loudly. "The only right you have is to keep walking. This is a private store, and we decide who comes in and who doesn't." Marcus looked around and saw a small crowd had gathered. Some customers passing on the sidewalk had stopped to watch the scene. Most seemed to be on the employees' side, nodding in approval. "You see how you're bothering everyone?" said Rachel. "Leave before we call the police." "The police? Why? I haven't done anything wrong." "Disturbing the peace," Michael answered promptly. "Besides, with that look, you probably have a police record." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. His own employees were not only humiliating him but making prejudiced and cruel assumptions. He began to understand that the anonymous letter was right. There was a serious problem in his store, and he hadn't even suspected. "I work honestly," Marcus said, trying to maintain his dignity. "I collect cans, cardboard, bottles. There's nothing wrong with that." "Of course not," Sarah joined the conversation, with obvious sarcasm in her voice. "But that doesn't give you the right to enter any place you want. This store has a standard to maintain." "What standard?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious to hear the answer. "A standard of elegance and distinction," Jennifer answered proudly. "Our customers expect a refined environment without—" She paused, searching for the words, "without elements that might cause discomfort." "Elements?" Marcus repeated, incredulous. "Are you referring to me as an element?" "Look, man," David intervened, losing his patience. "That's enough talk. You are not entering the store, period. If you don't leave willingly, we'll have to remove you by force." Marcus looked into the eyes of each of his employees. They were the same people he greeted every day with a smile, asked about their families, helped when they had personal problems, but now, before him, they were cold and cruel strangers. "What if I said I know the manager of this store?" Marcus tried one last card. The employees glanced at each other and then burst out laughing. "Know the manager?" Rachel guffawed. "Sure, and I'm personal friends with Madison Taylor." "Mr. Marcus would never associate with someone like you," Jennifer said with absolute conviction. "He is a man of integrity, serious, who values elegance and professionalism." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. Was this how his employees saw him? As someone who would discriminate against people based on their appearance? "Besides," Michael added, "Mr. Marcus always taught us that appearance matters. A store like this needs to maintain its reputation. He would be furious if he knew we let someone like you in here." "Are you sure about that?" Marcus insisted. "Absolutely sure," David replied. "We've worked with him for years. We know his values and his principles. He would never approve of this." Marcus felt as if he were having a nightmare. His employees weren't just being prejudiced, they thought they were following his own guidance. That meant that, somehow, he had conveyed these ideas without even realizing it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. It was at that moment that a woman's voice was heard from behind the small crowd. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Mrs. Elizabeth, a lady of about 65 who had just arrived to shop. Marcus knew her well. She had been a loyal customer for over 10 years, always polite and kind to all the staff. Nothing serious, Mrs. Elizabeth, Jennifer hurried to answer. Just a small problem we're already handling. Mrs. Elizabeth approached and looked Marcus up and down. Her eyes, however, did not carry the same contempt as the employees. There was in them a mixture of curiosity and compassion. "And what problem would that be?" she asked. "This gentleman wants to enter the store," Rachel explained, pronouncing the word gentleman with evident reluctance. "But as you can see, he is not in the proper condition to frequent an establishment like this." Mrs. Elizabeth looked at Marcus again, this time more carefully. "And what exactly is the problem? Is he causing a disturbance? Is he being aggressive?" "No, ma'am," Michael admitted reluctantly. But what?" "Look at him, Mrs. Elizabeth," Sarah intervened. "Don't you think it would be uncomfortable to shop with a person in such condition wandering around the store?" Mrs. Elizabeth was silent for a few seconds, clearly thinking. Marcus held his breath, curious to hear her response. "You know something," she finally said. "When I was young, my family was very poor. My father was a factory worker, my mother a seamstress. We didn't have much, and I was often treated with contempt when I entered elegant stores. The employees grew uncomfortable with the revelation. Once," Mrs. Elizabeth continued, "I had saved money for months to buy a dress for my sister's wedding. I went into a store similar to this one, but the salespeople treated me so badly that I left crying. I never forgot that humiliation." "But Mrs. Elizabeth," Jennifer tried to argue, "the situation is different." "How is it different?" the lady interrupted. "This man is asking to enter a store. He said he has money. Where is the crime in that?" Marcus felt a wave of gratitude for that courageous lady who was defending a stranger. "The issue isn't crime," David explained. "It's a matter of maintaining the store's standard. Our other customers might feel uncomfortable." "And what do you think I should feel?" Mrs. Elizabeth asked, slightly raising her voice. "Are you telling me I should be uncomfortable by the presence of a human being who is just asking to enter a store?" "That's not it, ma'am," Rachel tried to smooth things over. "You are just being prejudiced," Mrs. Elizabeth said clearly, "and I'm sure Mr. Marcus would be horrified if he knew this." Marcus almost spoke up at that moment, but managed to control himself. He wanted to see where this situation would go. "On the contrary," Michael retorted, "Mr. Marcus has always instructed us to maintain the store's standards. He himself would never accept a situation like this." "Are you absolutely sure of that?" Mrs. Elizabeth insisted. "Yes, ma'am," Jennifer replied firmly. "We've known our manager for years. He is a man who values elegance and decorum above all." Mrs. Elizabeth shook her head sadly. "Then perhaps I have been mistaken about his character all these years." Marcus felt a stab in his heart. A customer he respected and admired was losing trust in him because of his employees' behavior. And the worst part was that they thought they were following his instructions. "You know what?" Mrs. Elizabeth said, picking up her purse. "If this store really discriminates against people based on their appearance, then it is not a place where I want to shop. I'll take my money elsewhere." "Mrs. Elizabeth, please," Jennifer pleaded. "It doesn't have to be this way. You are a special customer. You've always been treated well here." "And why am I special?" the lady questioned. "Because of my expensive clothes? My credit card. 30 years ago I could have been in his place," she pointed at Marcus, "and you would have treated me the same way." "But you are not," Rachel murmured. "No, I'm not. But I could be. Life takes many turns, and when it takes a turn on you, I hope you find people more compassionate than you are being today." Mrs. Elizabeth turned to Marcus and said, "I'm sorry for what you're going through. Not all people are like this." And with those words, she walked away, leaving the employees in an embarrassed silence. Marcus took advantage of the moment of confusion to take another step toward the store entrance. "Please, I just want to look at some clothes. I promise I won't cause any trouble." "We already said no," David quickly recomposed himself. "And now on top of that, you made us lose an important customer. Leave before the situation gets worse." An important customer. Marcus couldn't contain himself. "And I'm not important? You?" Michael laughed. "Man, you barely have money to buy a loaf of bread, let alone the clothes we sell here. Don't be ridiculous. How do you know how much money I have?" "Just look at you," Rachel answered. "It's written all over your face that you're broke." Marcus took a deep breath. The cruelty of the words was hurting him deeply, but he needed to continue. He needed to see how far his employees' prejudice would go. What if I bring the money? If I prove I can pay? Even if you had the money, Sarah said, which is highly unlikely, you still couldn't come in. Look at your state. You're dirty, you smell bad, your clothes are torn. Our other customers don't deserve to be subjected to that. So, you're discriminating against me because of my appearance? It's not discrimination, Jennifer protested. It's common sense. A store has to have standards. And who defines these standards? Management, of course, David answered. Mr. Marcus has always made it very clear that this store caters to a select and refined clientele. Marcus felt nauseous. Had he really given that impression? Had his guidance about professionalism and elegance been interpreted as a license for discrimination? Maybe you should ask the manager what he thinks about this, Marcus suggested. We don't need to ask, Michael said confidently. We know exactly what he would think. In fact, he'd probably be proud to see that we're maintaining the store's standards even in his absence. Proud? Marcus repeated, incredulous. Of course, Rachel confirmed. He always says we are the guardians of the store's reputation, that every employee represents the brand and must act according to the company's values. Marcus was beginning to understand the scale of the problem. His employees weren't being malicious. They genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. This meant he had failed as a leader in a way he had never imagined. It was at that moment that William Anderson, the assistant manager, arrived. Marcus had promoted him to that position 2 years ago, trusting fully in his competence and integrity. William was a 40-year-old man, married, father of 2, who had always shown dedication to his work. What's going on here? William asked, observing the situation. Mr. William, thank goodness you're here, Jennifer hurried to explain. This man is insisting on entering the store, but as you can see, William looked Marcus up and down and his expression immediately closed off. I see. And have you explained that it's not possible? Yes, sir, but he doesn't want to accept it. William approached Marcus with an authoritative posture. Look here, my friend, I'll be direct with you. This is a luxury department store, not a shelter for the homeless. I don't know what you want here, but you can be sure you won't get it. I just want to buy some clothes, Marcus said calmly. Buy some clothes? William laughed sarcastically. With what money? And even if you had money, we don't have products suitable for your profile. What profile? Oh, don't play dumb. You know very well what I'm talking about. Our clothes cost hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars. They're not for just anyone. Marcus felt anger growing inside him. This was the man he trusted the most, his right hand, someone he considered almost a brother, and now he was seeing a side of him he never imagined existed. So you believe only rich people can shop here? Not just rich, William corrected, but people who fit the store's profile. People who know how to behave, who dress appropriately, who won't scare away our clientele. And who decides who fits the profile? Well, that's obvious. Anyone with common sense can see. And you, clearly, do not fit. Marcus looked around and saw the other employees nodding in agreement. They all seemed to completely support William's position. Mr. William, David spoke up. Maybe we should call security. He's being very insistent. Good idea, William agreed. Call mall security and tell them we have a troublemaker here. A troublemaker? Marcus couldn't hide his disbelief. I haven't done anything but ask to enter a store. And that's trouble enough, William retorted. You're distracting our employees, bothering our customers, creating an unpleasant situation. If that's not trouble, I don't know what is. Marcus realized he had reached a point of no return. His employees were not only being prejudiced, but they were also preparing to call security on him. The situation was spiraling out of control. Before you call security, he said, I'd like to ask a question. Do you think the manager of this store would approve of your behavior? Absolutely and completely, William answered without hesitation. Mr. Marcus was the one who taught us to uphold the store's standards above all else. He would be proud to see how we are protecting the company's reputation. Proud? Marcus repeated, feeling his heart break. Without a doubt, Jennifer confirmed. He always told us we are the guardians of elegance and professionalism, and that's exactly what we're doing. Marcus looked at each face around him. They were people he knew intimately, whom he considered family. But now he saw cold, prejudiced strangers who believed they were following his guidance. "And what if I said you are mistaken about what the manager would think?" "Then you would be lying," William stated categorically. "I've worked directly with him for years. I know his values, his principles, his business vision. He would never approve of someone like you frequenting this store. Someone like me. A homeless person, dirty, poorly dressed, uneducated," William listed cruelly. "Mr. Marcus values elegance, distinction, class. You represent everything he detests." Marcus felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Was this how his employees saw him, as someone who would detest poor people? "Are you absolutely certain you know the manager that well?" "Of course we are," Rachel answered. "We work with him every day. We know how he thinks, how he acts, what his values are." "And do his values include discriminating against people for their appearance?" "His values include maintaining excellence and professionalism," William corrected. "And sometimes that means making difficult choices about who can or cannot frequent the store." Marcus was nauseated. Not only were his employees being terribly prejudiced, but they were also attributing those prejudices to him. They genuinely believed they were acting according to his will. It was at that moment that a customer entered the store. It was Patricia Harrison, an elegant woman of about 50, whom Marcus had known for several years. She stopped abruptly when she saw the commotion at the entrance. "What's going on?" she asked, clearly disturbed. "Nothing serious, Mrs. Patricia," William hurried to explain. "Just a small misunderstanding that we are already resolving." Patricia looked at Marcus and her expression became uncomfortable. "And he is?" "A troublemaker who is insisting on entering the store," Michael explained. "But we are already arranging for his removal." "Oh, I see," Patricia said, seeming relieved. "What an unpleasant situation. I hope you resolve it quickly. It's not the sort of thing one expects to encounter in a store like this." Marcus felt humiliated in a way he had never experienced before. A customer he knew and respected was talking about him as if he were an inconvenient object that needed to be removed. "Don't you think all people have the right to enter a store?" Marcus asked Patricia directly. She seemed surprised that he had spoken to her directly. "Well, I suppose it depends on the situation. Some stores have specific standards." "And what would those standards be?" Patricia was clearly uncomfortable with the question. "Look, I don't want to be rude, but you can see that, well, there's an obvious difference between us, isn't there?" "What difference?" "The difference is obvious," William interjected, trying to spare the customer the embarrassment. "And now, enough talk. David, call security now." "No, wait," Patricia said, seeming to have had an idea. "Let me ask him something." She turned to Marcus. "If you have money to buy here, as you said, where did it come from?" Marcus hesitated for a moment. "I work." "Work where? Doing what?" "I collect recyclable materials, I do odd jobs, I work where I can." Patricia exchanged meaningful looks with the staff. "And exactly how much money do you have?" Marcus showed the crumpled bills he had prepared. $200. $200? Rachel laughed. "With $200 you can't even buy a t-shirt here." "I can't." "Of course not," Sarah confirmed. "Our t-shirts cost at least $300. $200 isn't even enough to buy underwear." Marcus pretended to be surprised. "I didn't know it was that expensive." "That's right," Patricia said with a tone of satisfaction. "Now you understand why it makes no sense for you to be here. It's like trying to buy a car at a Lexus dealership with bicycle money. But I can save more money and come back another time. Even if you saved $1,000, William said, it still wouldn't be suitable. It's not just a matter of money, it's a matter of suitability." "Suitability?" "Yes, social, cultural, behavioral suitability. This store caters to a specific clientele, and you clearly are not part of it." Marcus was beginning to understand the depth of the prejudice. It wasn't just a matter of appearance or money. It was a systematic, deeply ingrained class prejudice. "What if I cleaned up? If I came back in better clothes?" "It wouldn't help," Michael replied promptly. "It's a matter of class, man. You might dress better, but you'll always be what you are. And what am I? A garbage collector, Rachel said cruelly. Always have been and always will be. No matter what clothes you wear, you'll never have the elegance and distinction of our real clients. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. The cruelty of the words was devastating. These were people he considered family, and now they were attacking him in the cruelest way possible. Great. Now he's going to cry, Patricia said with disgust. Look at this embarrassing situation. Please remove him from here immediately. Security is already on its way, David informed after hanging up the phone. They'll handle this quickly. Marcus looked around one more time. All the faces he knew so well were turned against him, full of contempt and rejection. He had discovered a terrible truth about his own company and about himself. But before security arrived, a woman's voice made itself heard. Excuse the interruption. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Grace Williams, a 62-year-old employee who had worked at the store for over 15 years. She was responsible for the plus-size women's clothing section and had always been one of the most beloved and respected employees. What is it, Mrs. Grace? William asked, clearly annoyed by another interruption. I'd like to speak with this gentleman, if you allow. Speak with him. What for? It's personal, Grace Williams replied calmly, approaching Marcus. Mrs. Grace, with all due respect, Jennifer intervened, but I don't think that's a good idea. The situation is already complicated enough. It won't take long, Grace Williams insisted. May I exchange a few words with him? Williams sighed impatiently. All right, but be quick. Security is already coming. Grace Williams approached Marcus and looked directly into his eyes. There was something different in her gaze. There was no contempt or disgust, but a mixture of curiosity and compassion that Marcus hadn't seen in any other employee. What is your name? She asked gently. Marcus, he replied without thinking. Marcus? She repeated, and Marcus realized he had made a mistake. He should have given a fake name. It's Marcus Thompson. Grace Williams studied him for a few more seconds, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Marcus Thompson, she murmured. Interesting. Is there a problem? William asked impatiently. No problem, Grace Williams replied, still staring intently at Marcus. I was just thinking, you remind me of someone. Marcus felt his heart race. Could she be suspicious? Remind you of someone? Yes, someone I know very well, but I can't remember who. Mrs. Grace, Rachel intervened, with all due respect, but we don't have time for these conversations. The situation here needs to be resolved. Of course, Grace Williams agreed, but continued to look at Marcus. Just tell me one thing, Marcus. What do you think about the way they are treating you here? The question took everyone by surprise. Marcus hesitated before answering. I think it's not fair. Why? Because all people should have the right to be treated with respect, regardless of their appearance or social condition. Grace Williams nodded slowly. I completely agree. And what do you think the manager of this store would think about that? Marcus felt he was being tested in some way. I would like to believe that he would agree with me. Would like to believe? You're not sure? The truth is, I don't know the manager personally, but I hope he is a fair and decent person. I have known the manager for many years, Grace Williams said, and her voice had a strange tone. And I can say he is a good person, but sometimes even good people can lose their way. Marcus didn't know what to say. There was something in Grace Williams's tone of voice that made him uncomfortable. Mrs. Grace, William interrupted. Sorry for the interruption, but security has arrived. We need to resolve this now. Marcus looked and saw two mall security guards approaching. His disguise had come to an end. Either he revealed who he was, or he would be forcibly removed from his own store. What's the problem here? One of the security guards asked. This man is disturbing our customers and staff, William explained. He insists on entering the store, but as you can see, he is not in a condition to do so. The security guard looked Marcus up and down. Sir, you're going to have to leave, This is a private store, and they have the right to choose who can or cannot enter. But I just wanted to buy some clothes, Marcus protested weakly. Even so, if they don't want you to enter, you have to respect that. Now come with me without making a fuss. Marcus looked around one more time. All his employees were there, watching his humiliation with satisfaction. Patricia seemed relieved. Even some other customers who had stopped to watch seemed to approve of the decision. Only Grace Williams maintained a different expression. Her eyes still studied him with that strange curiosity, as if she were on the verge of discovering something important. "All right," Marcus finally said. "I'll leave." He began walking toward the exit, escorted by the security guards, but before leaving completely, he turned one last time. "I just want you all to know one thing," he said, looking directly at his employees. "One day you will discover that you have judged a person completely wrong, and when that day comes, I hope you remember how you treated me today." "That's right," Michael mocked. "Keep dreaming, man." Marcus left the store with a broken heart and a swirling mind. In less than 2 hours, he had discovered things about his company and about himself that had completely shaken his convictions. He walked through the streets of downtown New York, still in disguise, reflecting on everything that had happened. The words of his employees echoed in his mind. "Mr. Marcus would never associate with someone like you. He values elegance and decorum above all. He would be proud to see how we are protecting the company's reputation." Was that how they saw him? As someone who would approve of discrimination and prejudice? Marcus began to mentally review all his interactions with the employees over the years. Had he given that impression without realizing it? He remembered the times he had emphasized the importance of elegance and professionalism. Had his words been interpreted as a license to discriminate? Had he, in his quest to maintain high standards, created an environment where prejudice was not only tolerated, but encouraged? Marcus sat on a park bench, still processing everything. The experience had been devastating, but also revealing. He had discovered a painful truth about his leadership and about the unintended consequences of his actions. But there was one thing that intrigued him: Grace Williams's behavior. Why had she been different from the others? Why had she shown compassion when everyone else showed contempt? And why did she seem to be suspicious of something? Marcus decided he needed to better understand what was happening. He couldn't just go back the next day and pretend nothing had happened. He needed a plan to deal with the situation in a way that could really change things. He decided to continue the disguise for a few more hours, observing his store from a distance. He wanted to see how his employees behaved when they thought no one was watching. Marcus positioned himself in a cafe across the street where he could observe the entrance to his store. He ordered a simple coffee and sat at a table near the window. The waiter served him with visible reluctance, clearly bothered by his appearance. During the afternoon, Marcus observed the store's activity. He saw his employees attending to elegant customers with smiles and courtesy. He saw William greeting some important clients with warm handshakes. He saw Rachel and Jennifer laughing and chatting animatedly during quiet moments. Everything seemed normal and professional. Any outside observer would say it was a well-run store with polite and competent employees. Marcus began to question whether he had exaggerated his interpretation of the morning's incident. But then, around 3 in the afternoon, he saw something that made him change his mind. An elderly man, dressed in simple but clean clothes, approached the store entrance. He wasn't dirty or ragged like Marcus had been that morning, but he clearly wasn't a customer of the store's usual profile. Marcus watched closely as the man hesitated at the entrance, clearly intimidated by the luxury of the environment. Finally, he gathered courage and entered. Immediately, Marcus saw David and Michael position themselves near the man, watching his every move. The man walked slowly through the store, looking at the clothes with admiration but not touching anything. When he stopped to look more closely at a section of suits, Rachel approached with an expression Marcus knew well. It was the same expression she had used with him that morning. "Can I help you?" Marcus read on her lips, but her body language made it clear she wasn't being genuinely helpful. The man said something Marcus couldn't hear, but he saw Rachel shake her head negatively and point in another direction. The man looked disappointed but continued walking through the store. Within minutes, Marcus saw William approach the man. The conversation was brief, and from what Marcus could observe, polite but firm. The man left the store with his shoulders hunched, clearly discouraged. Marcus felt anger growing inside him. That had not been an isolated incident. It was a systematic pattern of behavior. His employees were truly discriminating against people based on appearance and social status. He left the cafe and followed the elderly man, who was walking slowly down the sidewalk. "Excuse me," Marcus approached him. The man turned, surprised. "Yes?" "I saw you leaving that store. May I ask what happened inside?" The man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I also tried to go in there this morning and was treated very poorly. I wanted to know if the same thing happened to you." The man looked Marcus up and down and seemed to identify with his situation. "Ah, so you too? To what? You're also not the type they want in their store." Marcus felt his heart tighten. "What exactly happened?" "I was looking for a suit for my granddaughter's wedding," the man explained. "I have a little money saved, thought I could buy something nice for the occasion, but when I went in there, the employees made it very clear I wasn't welcome." "How so?" "They weren't directly rude, but the way they looked at me, the way they spoke to me." The man sighed. "The assistant manager came to speak to me and said they didn't have anything in my budget. He didn't even ask what my budget was." "And what was it?" $2,000. I thought it would be enough for a suit, but apparently I was mistaken." Marcus was shocked. $2,000 was more than enough to buy a good suit at his store. The man had been discouraged by pure prejudice. "I'm sorry you went through that," Marcus said sincerely. "Ah, it's not the first time," the man replied sadly. "When you've been poor your whole life, you end up getting used to that kind of treatment. But I thought at a big store like that it would be different." "It should be different," Marcus said angrily. "Yeah, but it's not. That's just how the world is. The rich stick with the rich, the poor stick with the poor. And when you try to cross that line, there's always someone to put you back in your place." The man said goodbye and continued on his way, leaving Marcus even more determined to do something about the situation. He returned to the cafe and continued observing his store. For the rest of the afternoon, he saw two more similar incidents, ordinary people being discouraged or treated coldly by the employees. Marcus realized there was a systematic and deep-seated problem in his company. It wasn't just a matter of a few prejudiced employees. It was an organizational culture that had developed over time, possibly influenced by his own actions and words as a leader. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. When the store closed at 6 in the evening, Marcus decided to follow some of his employees to better understand their motivations and perspectives. He kept a safe distance as he watched William, Jennifer, and Rachel leaving together. The three stopped at a nearby bar, apparently to have a beer after work. Marcus managed to sit at a nearby table where he could catch pieces of their conversation. "What a complicated day," he heard Jennifer say. "First that beggar this morning, then that old man this afternoon. Seems like we attracted all the troublemakers today." "Right," Rachel agreed. "At least we handled it quickly. Imagine if we had let them stay in the store. The other customers would have been bothered." "You did the right thing," William said approvingly. "Mister, Marcus has always taught us that we must protect the store's environment. You acted exactly as he would expect." Marcus felt nauseous hearing those words. They truly believed they were following his guidelines. "Good thing Mrs. Elizabeth didn't come back after that this morning," Rachel commented. "She seemed very upset." "She'll forget," William said confidently. "People speak in the heat of the moment, but when they stop to think, they understand we were right." "You think so?" Jennifer seemed doubtful. She really did seem very angry. "Look, if she decides not to come back, that's her problem," William said coldly. "We can't please everyone. What's important is maintaining the store's standards, and that's what we did." "What if she tells Mr. Marcus?" "Tell him what? That we protected the store from undesirables. He'll congratulate us." Marcus was listening to a conversation that was deeply disturbing him. His employees had not only acted with prejudice, but were also rationalizing their actions as if they were heroic. "Do you really think we did the right thing?" Rachel asked, seeming to have some doubt. "Of course we did," William replied categorically. "Look, you all have to understand something. This store is not a public service. It's a private company that serves a specific clientele. If we start accepting just anyone, we'll lose our identity and our real customers." "But doesn't it seem kind of cruel?" Rachel insisted. "Cruel?" Jennifer spoke up. "Rachel, you're new to the company, so you're still learning. But this market is just like that. Every store has its target audience, and we're no exception." "Exactly," William agreed. "And Mr. Marcus has always made that very clear. He didn't get where he is by being nice to everyone. He's successful because he knows how to make tough choices." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. They were painting him as cold and calculating, when in reality he had always tried to be fair and humane in his business. "But what about Mrs. Grace?" Rachel asked. "She seemed to disagree with you today." "Oh, Mrs. Grace," William sighed. "She's a good employee, but sometimes she's too sentimental. She comes from a different generation, when things were more naive." "What do you mean, naive?" "She still believes in those romantic ideas that all people are equal and deserve the same treatment, but anyone who works in retail knows that's not realistic." "She's been with the company for over 15 years, Jennifer observed. "Mr. Marcus trusts her a lot." "Yes, and precisely because of that she has some freedom to express her opinions," William admitted. "But at the end of the day, I'm the one who makes the important decisions. And when it comes to maintaining the store's standards, I have no doubts about what to do." Marcus was growing increasingly outraged. William was behaving as if he owned the store, making decisions based on what he thought Marcus would approve. "Do you think we should tell him about today's incidents?" Rachel asked. "Tell him what exactly?" William replied. "That we did our job? That we protected the store from unsuitable people? That's our duty." "But what if he finds out through other means?" "How would he find out?" Jennifer asked. "And even if he does, we didn't do anything wrong. On the contrary, we did exactly what he taught us to do." Marcus realized his employees were creating a narrative where they were the heroes of the story, protecting the company from external threats. They genuinely believed they were acting correctly. "You know what bothers me the most?" William said after taking a sip of beer. "It's that people like those today always play the victim. They know very well they don't belong in certain environments, but they still insist on causing trouble." "That's true," Jennifer agreed. "That homeless man today was clearly trying to cause problems. There was no real reason for him to want to enter the store." "Exactly. And he even tried to manipulate us, saying he knew the manager," William laughed, "as if Mr. Marcus would associate with someone of that type." Marcus felt anger boiling in his veins. They were talking about him as if he were a despicable being and still laughing about the situation. "I just hope tomorrow is a calmer day," Rachel said. "It will be," William assured. "Incidents like these are rare. Most people understand their place. And if they don't, we teach them," Jennifer laughed. The three laughed together, as if they had made a funny joke. Marcus had to control himself not to stand up and confront them right there. Instead, he left the bar discreetly and walked through the streets, trying to process everything he had heard. His employees had not only acted with prejudice, they were proud of it. And worse still, they were doing it in his name, believing they were following his guidance. Marcus realized he had failed as a leader in a way he had never imagined. Somehow his messages about professionalism and excellence had been distorted and turned into justifications for discrimination. But something bothered him even more: the ease with which they had rationalized their actions. There was no hesitation, no moral doubts. For them, discriminating against poor people was simply part of the job. Marcus arrived home late at night, physically and emotionally exhausted. He took a long shower, washing off not just the dirt from the disguise, but also trying to process everything he had experienced that day. As he looked at himself in the bathroom mirror, Marcus barely recognized the man he saw there. In a single day, his certainties about himself and his company had been completely shaken. He had discovered that his employees saw him as someone who would approve of discrimination and prejudice. He had discovered that his store had a systematic culture of social exclusion. and he had discovered that somehow he was responsible for all of it. Marcus spent the night awake, mentally reviewing every interaction he had had with his employees over the years. He tried to identify the moments when his words could have been misinterpreted, the occasions when he might have given the wrong impression about his values. He remembered a conversation he had had with William 2 years ago when he promoted him to assistant manager. Marcus had said something like, "William, you understand the importance of maintaining our reputation. Not every customer is suitable for our brand, and I expect you to know how to distinguish." At the time, Marcus had been referring to problematic customers, people who caused trouble, who didn't pay their bills, who treated employees poorly. But now he realized his words could have been interpreted much more broadly. There was also an occasion when he had praised Jennifer for maintaining the store's standards after she had elegantly handled a situation involving a drunk customer. Marcus had used it as an example of professionalism, but now he wondered if the message he conveyed was that excluding people was something positive. The more Marcus reflected, the more he realized he had failed as a communicator. His intentions may have been good, but the impact of his words had been devastating. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a clear resolution. He needed to do something to change the situation. But it wasn't enough to simply reprimand his employees. He needed to better understand how and why that culture had developed. Marcus decided to continue his experiment for one more day, but this time with a different approach. Instead of trying to enter the store, he would observe closely how his employees interacted with each other and how they treated different types of customers. He dressed again in the disguise clothes and positioned himself in an area where he could observe his store without being seen. Throughout the morning, he noticed that the employees' behavior varied drastically depending on the customer's appearance. Well-dressed customers were greeted with warm smiles, respectful greetings, and personalized attention. Customers of simpler appearance, even those who were clearly clean and tidy, received noticeably colder treatment. Marcus saw Rachel assist an elderly lady dressed simply with a polite, by-the-book courtesy, but without the genuine warmth she showed to more elegant customers. He saw Michael discreetly follow a well-dressed young black man, clearly suspicious despite there being no reason for it. But what shocked him most was overhearing a conversation between Jennifer and Sarah during a lull in the store's activity. "Did you notice that woman who came in a little while ago?" Jennifer said, referring to a middle-aged customer dressed simply. "I did," Sarah replied. "Clearly not our target clientele." "Exactly. I bet she'll take a quick look around and leave without buying anything. It's always like that. It's a waste of time to serve that kind of people. They just want to peek at the expensive things they'll never be able to afford." Marcus was horrified. His employees were categorizing customers based purely on appearance and making cruel assumptions about their intentions and financial capacity. The conversation continued, and Marcus heard things that made him sick. "At least we didn't have any incident like yesterday," Jennifer commented. True. That homeless man was the limit. The nerve trying to come in here as if it were any ordinary place. The worst part was him insisting he knew Mr. Marcus, as if our manager would associate with someone of that sort. Speaking of which, did you notice how Mrs. Grace acted strange yesterday? It seemed like she was on the guy's side. I did notice. She can be a bit naive about these things sometimes, too soft-hearted. Marcus was hearing a cruel analysis not only of himself, but also of Grace Williams, one of the most dedicated and kind-hearted employees he had. "Do you think we should say something to Mr. William about Mrs. Grace's attitude yesterday?" Sarah asked. "I don't know. She's been here a long time, and Mr. Marcus is very fond of her. But being fond is one thing. Accepting insubordination is another. She clearly disagreed with how we handled the situation." "That's true. What if it becomes a habit? If she starts treating any homeless person like a customer?" Marcus realized Grace Williams was being attacked precisely for having shown compassion and humanity. This made him think about all the other employees who might be pressured to follow the prejudiced line. It was at that moment that he saw Grace Williams arriving for work. She walked through the store greeting her colleagues, but Marcus noticed a subtle tension in some of the interactions. His suspicions were confirmed when he saw William approach her with a serious expression. Marcus couldn't hear the conversation, but from the body language, It was obvious William was reprimanding Grace Williams for something. She listened in silence, shaking her head occasionally, but her expression showed she did not agree with what she was hearing. After William walked away, Marcus saw Grace Williams stand still for a few moments, clearly shaken. She looked around the store with an expression of sadness and disappointment that broke Marcus's heart. At that moment, Marcus made a decision. He could not continue to passively watch while decent employees like Grace Williams were persecuted for doing the right thing. It was time to intervene. But before revealing his identity, Marcus wanted to have a private conversation with Grace Williams. He had noticed the day before that she seemed suspicious of something and wanted to better understand her perspective on what was happening at the store. Marcus waited until lunchtime when he saw Grace Williams leaving the store alone. He discreetly followed her to a nearby diner where she sat at an isolated table with a melancholy expression. Marcus approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, do you remember me?" Grace Williams looked up and immediately recognized him. "Of course I remember. You're Marcus who was at the store yesterday." "That's right. May I sit down?" She hesitated for a moment, then indicated the chair across from her. "Yes, you may." Marcus sat down, noticing that Grace Williams studied him intently with that same curious look from the day before. "What do you want with me?" she asked directly. "I want to understand a few things about what happened yesterday. You were the only person who treated me with respect, and I'd like to know why." Grace Williams sighed deeply. "Because I was raised to treat all people with dignity, regardless of their appearance or social standing. It's that simple." "And the other employees weren't raised the same way?" "They were, but—" She stopped, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Sometimes people let themselves be influenced by the work environment. They start adopting behaviors that aren't natural to them." "What kind of behaviors?" "Prejudice, discrimination, coldness toward those who are different. It's as if it's easier to follow the group than to maintain your own values." Marcus nodded, understanding perfectly what she meant. "And how long has this been going on?" "About 2 years, more or less. It started gradually but got worse over time." 2 years, Marcus calculated mentally. It was exactly when he had promoted William to assistant manager. Yes, before that, there were occasional problems, but nothing systematic like now. What changed? Grace Williams hesitated again, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I don't know if I should be talking about this with you." "Please," Marcus insisted. "I went through a humiliation yesterday that I'll never forget. I just want to understand how things got to this point." "All right," she finally conceded. "The truth is the store's culture has changed a lot lately. What was once a welcoming environment has become hostile." "Hostile how?" "Hostile to employees who don't fall in line. Hostile to customers who don't fit the desired profile. Hostile to anyone who questions the methods." "And who defines these methods?" "The assistant manager, mainly. He has a lot of power and uses that power to shape everyone else's behavior." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. "And the main manager? Doesn't he know what's happening?" Grace Williams gave a sad smile. "The main manager is a good person, but I think he's lost touch with the reality of the store. He trusts the assistant too much and doesn't see what really happens day to day." "How so?" "He arrives in the morning, stays in his office handling administrative matters, attends to some important clients and leaves. He doesn't see how the employees treat ordinary customers, doesn't notice the tension that exists among the staff." Marcus fell silent, absorbing Grace Williams's words. That was exactly how he conducted his routine. He had gradually isolated himself from the daily operations, trusting that William would take care of everything. "And have you tried to talk to him about this?" "I've tried a few times, indirectly, but he always seems to believe everything is running smoothly, and the assistant manager is very skilled at presenting only the positive aspects. So he really doesn't know. I don't believe he does, and even if he suspects something, I think he prefers not to get involved. It's easier to let the assistant handle the problems." Marcus felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief to know that Grace Williams did not see him as a malicious person, but guilt for having been so negligent with his responsibilities as a leader. "May I ask one more question?" Marcus said. "Of course." "Why were you looking at me so strangely yesterday, as if you were trying to remember something?" Grace Williams smiled for the first time in the conversation. "Because you reminded me a lot of someone I know, someone I respected very much but who perhaps lost his way." Marcus felt his heart race. "Who?" "The store manager. A few years ago he was a very humane man who genuinely cared about employees and customers. But lately, I don't know, he seems to have changed." "Changed how?" "He became more distant, more focused on numbers, less interested in people. It's as if he forgot that a company is made of people, not just profits." Marcus could barely breathe. "What if I said that maybe he hasn't changed as much as you think? What if he just got lost?" "Then I would say there is still hope, because good people who get lost can find their way back, if someone helps them." Marcus looked into Grace Williams's eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in a long time: genuine compassion, wisdom gained from experience, and an unshakable faith in people's ability to change for the better. "Mrs. Grace," he said with a choked voice, "what would you say if you discovered that someone you know well is not who they seem to be?" "I would say that we all wear masks sometimes, and that what matters is not who we pretend to be, but who we choose to be when no one is watching." Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. And if that person wanted to change, if they wanted to do the right things, I would say it's never too late to start over, but that real change requires courage, humility, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Marcus took a deep breath. The moment of truth had come. "Mrs. Grace, I need to tell you something. My name really is Marcus, but my last name is not Thompson." Grace Williams looked at him curiously. "My name is Marcus Thompson," he continued, "and I am the manager of Royal Elegance." Grace Williams's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, shock, understanding, and finally, a mix of compassion and disappointment. "I knew," she said softly. "Deep down I knew there was something familiar about you, your gestures, your way of speaking, but I didn't want to believe it." "Why didn't you want to believe it?" "Because it would mean that my boss, someone I respected, was testing his own team in a very cruel way, and because it would mean things at the store were worse than I imagined." Marcus lowered his head, ashamed. "You are right. It was cruel of me. But I needed to know the truth." "And did you find it?" "I discovered things I never imagined. I discovered I created a culture of discrimination without realizing it. I discovered my employees see me as someone who would approve of prejudice. I discovered I failed as a leader in a terrible way." Grace Williams was silent for a few moments, processing the confession. "And what do you intend to do now?" she finally asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I know I need to change everything, but I don't know where to start. How do you fix years of wrong organizational culture?" "You start by taking responsibility," Grace Williams said firmly. "It's no use blaming only the assistant manager or the other employees. You are the leader, and leaders are responsible for the culture they create." "You're right. The second step is to stop hiding behind other people. If you want to know what really happens in your store, you can't stay locked in the administration office all day." Marcus nodded, accepting the criticism. "And third," she continued, "you need to decide what kind of leader you want to be from now on, because it's not enough to just correct the mistakes of the past. You need to create a new vision for the future." "What kind of vision?" "A vision where all people are treated with dignity, where employees aren't afraid to do the right thing, where success is measured not just by profits, but also by the positive impact the company has on the community." Marcus felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "Do you believe it's possible?" "I do, but it will be difficult and it will require painful changes. You will have to fire people. You will have to face resistance. You will have to publicly admit you were wrong. And if I fail, then at least you will have tried. And that's already more than most leaders do when they discover their companies have problems." Marcus looked at Grace Williams with deep gratitude. "Why are you helping me? After everything that happened, wouldn't I deserve to have you turn your back on me?" "Because I saw the pain in your eyes yesterday when you were humiliated. Because I saw the anger when you heard the cruel things they said. And because I believe a person who is capable of feeling that pain and that anger still has an active conscience. Mrs. Grace, can I ask a favor? Of course. Help me change the store. Not just as an employee, but as a consultant, as a guide. I need someone to tell me the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Grace Williams smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen on her face. I can do that, but on one condition. What? That you are truly prepared for deep changes, because I won't waste my time helping someone who just wants to make cosmetic adjustments. I am prepared, Marcus said with conviction. I promise I am prepared. Then let's start right now. You will come back to the store with me, own up to what you did and start implementing changes immediately. Marcus felt a chill in his stomach. Now? Now. Because every minute you delay is a minute when someone could be discriminated against in your store. And I won't be an accomplice to that for one more day. Marcus took a deep breath, gathering courage. All right, let's go. They left the diner together and walked back to the store. Along the way, Marcus felt a mixture of terror and determination. He knew the next moments would be some of the most difficult of his professional life. One thing before we go in, Grace Williams said when they arrived in front of the store. How do you want to do this? Will you tell the truth to everyone at once? I think so, Marcus replied. There's no point in hiding anything anymore. If I want to create a culture of honesty, I need to start by being honest myself. And the assistant manager? He will be the hardest to deal with. I know. William will feel betrayed and humiliated, but he also needs to understand the consequences of his actions. Are you prepared to fire him if necessary? Marcus hesitated. William was more than an employee. He was almost a brother. The idea of firing him was painful. If it's necessary, yes, he finally answered. I can't allow one person to keep creating a toxic environment, even if I like them personally. Great. Then let's go in. Marcus and Grace Williams entered the store together. Immediately, several employees looked surprised at Marcus, still in his beggar's clothes. Mrs. Grace, what are you doing with this man? Rachel asked with alarm. We already had trouble with him yesterday. And why did you bring him inside the store? Sarah added. Before Grace Williams could answer, William appeared, quickly coming toward them. Mrs. Grace, what is the meaning of this? He asked in an authoritative voice. Why have you brought this troublemaker back? William, Marcus said calmly, I need to speak with you and all the staff. It's urgent. William looked at Marcus as if he were an irritating insect. You have no authority to demand anything here. Security. Don't call security, Marcus said more firmly. I really need to speak with you all. Listen here, you wretched beggar. William lost his patience. Yesterday you already caused too many trouble. Today, you won't even enter the store. David, Michael. The two security guards approached quickly. Remove this man from here immediately, William ordered, and this time don't accept any excuses. Marcus looked around and saw that a small crowd had formed. All the employees were there, Rachel, Jennifer, Sarah, the security guards, and several others. Some customers had also stopped to watch the commotion. The moment of truth had arrived. My name is Marcus Thompson, he said loudly so everyone could hear, and I am the manager of this store. The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone stood completely still, as if they had been turned into statues. That's a lie, William was the first to react. You're a beggar trying to cause trouble. It's not a lie, Grace Williams confirmed. It really is Mr. Marcus. Marcus began to remove the elements of his disguise. He wiped the dirt from his face, combed his hair with his fingers, straightened his posture. Gradually, his true identity began to emerge. My God, Jennifer murmured, recognizing him. It really is him. It can't be, Rachel shook her head in denial. It can't be. But it is, Marcus confirmed, and I've spent the last 2 days observing how you treat people you consider inferior. The realization of what had happened began to hit the employees like successive waves. Their expressions changed from confusion to horror, from horror to despair. Mr. Marcus, William tried to regain his composure. I can explain. Explain what, William? Marcus interrupted him. Can you explain why you prevented me from entering my own store? Can you explain why you treated me with contempt and cruelty? Can you explain why you did all this in my name? Sir, we didn't know. Didn't know what? That all people deserve to be treated with respect? That discrimination is wrong? That you have no right to judge people by their appearance? The store was plunged into an awkward silence. The customers who had stopped to watch the scene seemed unsure whether to stay or leave. Do you want to know what hurt me the most? Marcus continued, his voice filled with emotion. It wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't the insults. It wasn't even the cruelty. It was discovering that you did all this believing I would approve. Mr. Marcus, Jennifer tried to speak, we always tried to follow your guidance. My guidance? Marcus raised his voice. When did I guide you to discriminate against poor people? When did I say appearance is more important than humanity? You always emphasized the importance of maintaining the store's standards. William tried to defend himself. Standards of service, William. Standards of quality, not standards of social exclusion. Marcus looked around at all the employees. Do you want to know what the real standard I expected from you was? To treat every person who enters this store as a human being worthy of respect. It was that simple. But sir, Rachel tried to argue, people in certain conditions might bother other customers. People like what, Rachel? Marcus asked directly. Finish the sentence. People like what? Rachel fell silent, realizing that anything she said would sound prejudiced. Poor people, Marcus completed for her. Black people? People who don't wear expensive clothes? Is that what you were going to say? No, sir, I didn't. Then explain one thing to me, Rachel. When did you all decide that I would approve of this kind of behavior? We thought that... You thought I was what kind of person? A cruel man who discriminates against other human beings because of their social condition. Marcus looked directly at William. And you, William? You who have worked with me for years, who I considered almost a brother? Did you really think I would be proud to see you humiliating defenseless people? William lowered his head, unable to maintain eye contact. Yesterday, Marcus continued, I heard you saying you were protecting the store's reputation, but you did exactly the opposite. You tarnished our reputation in a way that may never be completely repaired. Mr. Marcus, David, one of the security guards, finally spoke up. What can we do to fix this? Marcus looked at the man who had been cruel to him the day before, but who now seemed genuinely remorseful. The first thing you can do is understand that you were not following my guidance. You were following your own prejudices and attributing them to me. That's true, sir, David admitted. I'm very sorry. The second thing, Marcus continued, is to accept that this store is going to change completely starting today, and anyone who is not willing to change along with it will have to look for another job. A nervous murmur passed through the crowd of employees. And the third thing is to understand that you didn't just discriminate against people. You also harmed co-workers who tried to do the right thing. Marcus turned to Grace Williams. This woman tried to treat me with dignity yesterday, and for that she was reprimanded. She tried to defend basic human values, and for that she was questioned. You didn't just fail customers, you failed colleagues. Mrs. Grace, Jennifer said with a choked voice, I am so sorry. It wasn't our intention. The intention doesn't matter, Marcus interrupted. What matters are the actions and the consequences. And the consequences of your behavior have been devastating. Marcus paused, letting his words reverberate. Then he continued, But I can't put all the blame on you, because as I've discovered in the last few days, I also have responsibility in this. The employees looked at him in surprise. I isolated myself from the day-to-day operations. I delegated too much. I assumed that if the numbers were good, everything was fine. And in doing so, I allowed a toxic culture to develop right under my nose. Mr. Marcus, William tried to speak, you're not to blame. Yes, I am, William. I am very much to blame. As a leader, I am responsible for the culture of this company, and I clearly failed in that responsibility. Marcus took a deep breath before continuing. But acknowledging the blame is only the first step. Now I need to make difficult decisions to correct the situation." A tense silence fell over the store. Everyone knew significant changes were coming. "Starting today," Marcus announced, "this store will have a new customer service policy. Each and every person who walks in here will be treated with respect and courtesy, regardless of their appearance, race, age, or social condition." "Yes, sir," several voices replied in unison. "Second, any employee who discriminates against customers or colleagues will be fired immediately without exceptions." More nervous murmurs. "Third, we will implement a diversity and inclusion training program, and all employees will be required to participate. And fourth," Marcus made a dramatic pause, "there will be changes in this store's management team." All eyes turned to William, who visibly paled. "William," Marcus addressed his deputy directly, "you are being demoted from the position of assistant manager, effective immediately." "Mr. Marcus?" William began to protest. "This is not a discussion, William. You can continue as a regular employee, but you can no longer hold a leadership position. You have demonstrated that you lack the maturity and vision necessary to lead people." William closed his eyes, clearly devastated. "And the new assistant manager will be Grace Williams," Marcus announced. A whisper of surprise swept through the store. "Mrs. Grace demonstrated yesterday exactly the kind of leadership this store needs. She showed courage to do the right thing, even when everyone around her was doing the wrong thing." Grace Williams seemed surprised by the promotion, but quickly composed herself. "I accept the responsibility," she said firmly, "and I promise to work to ensure that all customers and employees are treated with dignity." Marcus turned again to the other employees. "Now I want each of you to think seriously about whether you want to continue working here, because the changes we are going to implement are profound, and not everyone will feel comfortable with them." "I want to stay." David, the security guard, was the first to speak. "And I promise I will never discriminate against anyone again." "Me too," Michael, the other security guard, agreed. "Yesterday I did things I am deeply ashamed of." One by one, the employees spoke up. Rachel, Jennifer, Sarah, all expressed regret and willingness to change. William remained silent, clearly wrestling with conflicting emotions. "And you, William?" Marcus asked. "Do you want to continue working here?" William raised his head, and Marcus could see tears in his eyes. "Mr. Marcus, I don't understand how things got to this point. I really thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting the store." "Protecting the store from what, William?" From people who could harm our reputation." "And who are those people?" William was silent for a long moment. I think I had prejudices I didn't even know existed." Marcus felt a spark of hope. "Go on." "I grew up in a family that always emphasized the importance of knowing your place in society. I always heard that there were natural differences between people, and that it was important to maintain those differences. And how did that affect your work here?" I think I unconsciously began to see the store as a place where those differences should be maintained, where different people shouldn't mix." Marcus nodded. "And now, what do you think of that perspective?" "I think I was completely wrong, and I think I caused a lot of unnecessary suffering." "William, I'm going to ask you a direct question. Do you want to change? Are you willing to question your own prejudices and work to become a better person?" "Yes," William answered without hesitation. "I am willing. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I want to try." Marcus looked into William's eyes and saw genuine sincerity. "Then you can stay. But as a regular employee, and with the obligation to go through all the sensitivity training we will implement." "I accept," William said gratefully, "and I promise I will do everything to deserve a second chance." Marcus turned to all the employees. "Now I want you to understand something very important. Real change doesn't happen overnight. You will have difficult moments. You will catch yourself thinking in prejudiced ways. You will make mistakes." The employees listened attentively. "What matters is that you commit to the process of change, that you are honest about your prejudices, that you ask for help when you need it, and that you never stop trying to be better people." "Yes, sir," several voices replied. "And I also commit to this process," Marcus continued. "I'll spend more time at the store, I'll be more present day to day, and I will work continuously to be a better leader." Marcus looked around and saw that the tension in the store had decreased considerably. There was still much work to do, but at least now he had a foundation upon which to build. "There's one more thing I need to do," he said. "I need to publicly apologize for this store's actions." "Mr. Marcus, is that necessary?" Rachel asked. "It is absolutely necessary, because other people were also discriminated against here, and they deserve a public apology." Marcus walked to the store entrance and began to speak loudly, so anyone passing on the street could hear. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I am the manager of this store, and I want to publicly apologize to all people who were discriminated against or mistreated in this establishment." Some passers-by stopped to listen. "For years, unknowingly, I allowed a culture of prejudice and exclusion to develop in this company. People were humiliated, disrespected, and rejected based solely on their appearance or social condition. More people stopped to listen, including some customers leaving other stores. Starting today, this store will have a new policy. All people will be welcome and treated with respect, regardless of any personal characteristic. And if anyone here does not follow this policy, they will be immediately fired." Marcus saw Mrs. Elizabeth in the crowd that had formed to hear his speech. She recognized him immediately, despite the partially removed disguise. "Mrs. Elizabeth," he addressed her directly, "you witnessed a shameful episode in this store yesterday. I want to personally apologize to you and assure you that nothing like it will ever happen again." Mrs. Elizabeth approached with an expression of curiosity and surprise. "You are really the manager of this store?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. And I am deeply ashamed of what you witnessed yesterday." "And the man who was mistreated? That was me, Mrs. Elizabeth. I disguised myself to discover how my employees really treated poor people, and what I discovered was far worse than I imagined." Mrs. Elizabeth was silent for a few moments, processing the information. "So you saw firsthand what it's like to be discriminated against?" "I saw and felt it, ma'am. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life, but it was also necessary." "And what do you intend to do now?" "Change everything, completely. This store will become an example of inclusion and respect." Mrs. Elizabeth nodded slowly. "Then perhaps I was mistaken about your character, Mr. Marcus. Perhaps there is still hope." "There is, Mrs. Elizabeth, and I hope to regain your trust with actions, not just words." "We shall see," she said, but Marcus noticed a faint smile on her lips. Marcus continued his public speech for a few more minutes, explaining the changes that would be implemented and inviting anyone who had been discriminated against at the store to return and give the establishment a second chance. When he finally finished, a small crowd had gathered, and many people applauded his words. Marcus felt simultaneously humbled and hopeful. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. In the following days, Marcus worked tirelessly to implement the promised changes. He hired a consulting firm specialized in diversity and inclusion to train the entire team. He implemented new, clear policies on respectful treatment of all customers, and most importantly, he began working directly on the store floor, observing and guiding customer service. Grace Williams proved to be an excellent assistant manager, bringing a human and compassionate perspective to all the store's decisions. She became a mentor to younger employees, teaching them to see each customer as a unique person worthy of respect. William, initially resistant to his new position, gradually began to embrace the change. He actively participated in training and became one of the employees most dedicated to applying the new policies. His transformation was slow but genuine. Rachel, Jennifer, and Sarah also went through significant change processes. They learned to question their own prejudices and became active advocates for the store's new culture. The security guards David and Michael were completely transformed. Instead of following people based on appearance, they began to offer genuine help to all customers, regardless of how they were dressed. After 3 months of intense changes, Marcus decided to run another test. He dressed again as a homeless person and visited his own store, but this time accompanied by a discreet film crew to document the experience. The results were dramatic. David and Michael greeted him respectfully at the entrance, offering help to find what he was looking for. Rachel approached with a genuine smile, asking how she could assist him. Grace Williams treated him with the same dignity she would give any customer. When Marcus revealed his identity at the end of this second test, all the employees laughed and applauded, proud of the transformation they had achieved. "You did this," Marcus said emotionally. "You transformed yourselves into better people and turned this store into something I can truly be proud of." The story of Royal Elegance's transformation spread quickly through social media and local press. The video of Marcus's second test went viral, being seen by millions of people across the country. Other companies began inviting Marcus to speak about leadership, diversity, and organizational change. He always began his talks by telling the story of the day he was humiliated in his own store, and how that experience completely changed his perspective on leadership. The store not only retained its old customers, but also attracted many new customers who admired its new inclusive approach. Revenue increased significantly, proving that doing good was also good for business. Mrs. Elizabeth became one of the store's most loyal customers, always praising the transformation she witnessed. She often brought friends and family to shop, proud to support a business that demonstrated genuine values. The elderly man Marcus had encountered on that first day also returned to the store. This time he was warmly welcomed and managed to buy the suit he wanted for his granddaughter's wedding. Marcus made sure to serve him personally, ensuring he had an exceptional experience. Many other people who had been discriminated against in the store over the years also returned, drawn by the news of the transformation. Each one was met with sincere apologies and exemplary treatment. Marcus also implemented social programs, such as special discounts for low-income individuals on special occasions, partnerships with social assistance organizations, and a scholarship program for employees' children. The transformation was not only external. Marcus discovered he had become a happier and more fulfilled person. Working in an environment based on respect and inclusion brought a satisfaction he had never experienced before. Grace Williams became not only his assistant manager, but also a close friend and advisor. Her wisdom and life experience continued to guide Marcus in moments of important decisions. William, who Marcus initially thought he would have to fire, became one of his most valuable employees. His journey of personal transformation served as an inspiration to other employees and even to customers who heard his story. 1 year after the initial incident, Marcus organized a special party at the store to celebrate the anniversary of the transformation. He invited all the employees, their families, loyal customers, and even some of the people who had been discriminated against in the store in the past. During the party, Marcus gave an emotional speech. "Exactly 1 year ago, I discovered that I did not know my own company or myself. I discovered that I had allowed prejudice and discrimination to flourish right under my nose. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life." The audience listened in respectful silence. But it was also the most transformative experience, because it forced me to face uncomfortable truths about my leadership and my own unconscious biases. It forced me to decide what kind of person and what kind of leader I wanted to be. Today, 1 year later, I can say with pride that this is not just a different store. We are different people, better people. And this was only possible because each of you had the courage to look in the mirror and decide to change. Marcus looked directly at each employee as he spoke. "David and Michael, you went from people who discriminated to people who welcome. Rachel, Jennifer, and Sarah, you learned to look beyond appearances and find the humanity in every customer. William, your personal transformation proves it is never too late to change. And Grace Williams," Marcus turned to his assistant manager, "you taught me that real leadership is not about power or control. It's about compassion, courage, and unwavering commitment to doing the right thing." The audience applauded warmly. "But the person who changed the most here was me," Marcus continued. "I learned that being a leader is not just about financial results. It's about creating an environment where all people can flourish. It's about using the power you have to lift others up, not to exclude them. I learned that diversity is not just politically correct, it is essential for any organization that wants to be truly excellent. Because when you exclude people, you also exclude their ideas, their perspectives, their unique contributions. Marcus paused, emotional. And most importantly, I learned that real change is possible. It is not easy, it does not happen overnight, and it requires courage to face uncomfortable truths, but it is possible. Therefore, my commitment to you is that this store will continue to be an example of inclusion, respect, and human excellence, not because it's good for business, although it is, but because it is simply the right thing to do. The party continued into the night, with employees, customers, and guests celebrating not only the success of the store, but also the proof that people and organizations can transform when there is a genuine will for change. In the following years, Marcus expanded the Royal Elegance model to other cities, always maintaining the same principles of inclusion and respect. Each new store was trained not only in sales techniques, but also in cultural sensitivity and humanized service. He also wrote a book about his experience titled The Undercover Manager: How I Discovered I Didn't Know My Own Company. The book became a bestseller and was translated into several languages, inspiring leaders around the world. Marcus often received letters from people who had been inspired by his story. Many were from other executives who had conducted their own undercover tests and discovered similar problems in their companies. Others were from employees who had found the courage to confront discrimination in their workplaces. A letter that particularly moved him came from a young black entrepreneur from Atlanta. "Mr. Marcus, I read your book and watched the videos about your transformation. Your story gave me the courage to start my own business, but with the right principles from the beginning. My company was created with diversity and inclusion as core values, not as something we added later. Thank you for showing that change is possible." Marcus framed that letter and kept it on his desk as a constant reminder of the positive impact his story had generated. 10 years after the initial incident, Marcus was invited to speak at an international leadership conference. In his presentation, he said, "Many people ask me if I regret disguising myself as a homeless person to test my employees. If it was cruel, if it was manipulative, if it was unnecessary. My answer is always the same. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my professional life. Not because I enjoyed being humiliated, it was a terrible experience, but because it opened my eyes to realities I would never have noticed otherwise." Leaders, do you really know your companies? Do you know how your employees treat customers when you're not looking? Do you know what culture you've actually created, not the culture you think you created? I'm not suggesting you all disguise yourselves as beggars. The audience laughed. But I am suggesting you find ways to see your organizations through the eyes of people who normally don't have a voice. Marginalized customers, lower-level employees, people who are different from you in some way. Because the truth is that many of us leaders live in bubbles. We are shielded from the reality of our own companies by layers of hierarchy, filtered reports, and our own resistance to hearing uncomfortable truths. Breaking that bubble can be painful. It can reveal flaws in our leadership we'd rather not see. It can force us to make difficult changes, but it can also transform us into truly exceptional leaders. After the conference, Marcus was approached by a young executive who said, "Mr. Marcus, your presentation inspired me greatly. But I have a question. How do you maintain the principles of inclusion when there's pressure for financial results?" Marcus smiled. "That's an excellent question. And I'll give you an answer that might surprise you. Inclusion and diversity don't hurt financial results, they improve results. When you treat every customer with respect, you expand your customer base. When you have diverse employees, you get richer perspectives and greater innovation. When you create an inclusive environment, you attract and retain the best talent. What hurts financial results is discrimination, because when you discriminate, you alienate potential customers, lose valuable talent, and create legal and reputational risks. So I don't see a conflict between doing good and having good results. In fact, in my experience, they go hand in hand." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Marcus sharing concrete examples of how the changes in his store had positively impacted both the culture and the financial results. When Marcus finally got home that night, he reflected on how far he had come since that terrible day 10 years ago when he was humiliated in his own store. He thought of Grace Williams, who was now the regional director of all Royal Elegance stores, continuing to spread the values of inclusion and respect. He thought of William, who had become a speaker on personal transformation, using his own journey as an example that change is possible. He thought of all the employees who had grown and developed in a healthier, more inclusive environment. But more than anything, Marcus thought about the thousands of people who had been positively impacted by the changes implemented over the years. Customers who were treated with dignity when previously they would have been discriminated against. Employees who learned to look beyond superficial differences. Other companies that were inspired to make their own changes. Marcus picked up a photo taken at the first anniversary party of the transformation. In the photo, he was surrounded by all his employees, all smiling genuinely. They weren't forced or professional smiles. They were the smiles of people who were proud of where they worked and of the people they had become. He mentally compared that image to how things were before the transformation. Employees who discriminated against customers, who perpetuated prejudices, who worked in a toxic environment without even realizing it. A leader, himself, who was completely disconnected from the reality of his own company. The difference was remarkable not only in behaviors, but in the people themselves. Everyone seemed happier, more fulfilled, prouder of the work they did. Marcus understood that the true measure of a leader's success isn't just in financial results, but in the quality of the environment he creates and the positive impact he has on people's lives. He also understood that his journey of personal and professional growth wasn't over. Inclusive leadership isn't a destination you reach, but a continuous process of learning, self-reflection, and improvement. Every day, Marcus continued to ask himself, what kind of leader am I being today? What impact am I having on the lives of people around me? How can I do better? These questions kept him humble and focused on what really mattered, serving people and creating a more inclusive and respectful world, one interaction at a time. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his flagship store as he always did, no longer isolating himself in the administration office, but walking the store floor, greeting employees, talking with customers, observing interactions. He saw Rachel helping an elderly customer choose a dress for her granddaughter's wedding, treating her with the same attention she would give any VIP client. He saw David helping a young visually impaired person find the fitting room, with genuine patience and kindness. He saw Grace Williams instructing a new employee on the importance of treating every customer as a unique and special person. These scenes, which repeated daily in his stores, were the true measure of the transformation's success. They weren't just changes in behavior, they were changes of heart and mind. As he observed these interactions, Marcus was approached by a young man who seemed nervous. "Excuse me, are you Marcus Thompson?" "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" "My name is Charles Miller. I saw your video online about how you disguised yourself to test your employees." "Ah, yes. What did you think?" "Well, actually, I wanted to tell you something. I work at a store here in the mall, and after seeing your story, I started paying more attention to how we treat different customers." Marcus became interested. "And what did you discover?" "I discovered that we do many of the things your employees used to do. We follow people who look suspicious, we treat customers who aren't elegant poorly, we assume things about people based only on appearance." "And how do you feel about that?" "I feel bad, really bad, because I myself was discriminated against when I was younger and my family didn't have much money. I know how humiliating it is." Marcus nodded with understanding. "And what do you intend to do?" "I wanted to know if you could give me some advice. How can I change things at my store without causing problems with my boss?" Marcus smiled. This was exactly the kind of conversation that inspired him to keep sharing his story. "Charles, the first thing you need to understand is that change starts with you. You cannot control how others behave, but you can control how you behave." "How so?" "Start by treating every customer with genuine respect regardless of how they appear. When you see colleagues discriminating against someone, intervene politely. Be the example you wish to see. And if my boss doesn't like it? Then you'll have to make a decision about what kind of person you want to be and where you want to work. But in my experience, most bosses are impressed when they see employees treating customers exceptionally well, even if they don't initially understand why. Charles nodded, absorbing the advice. May I make a suggestion? Marcus continued. Of course. Why don't you suggest to your boss that they implement a customer service training? You can present it as a way to improve sales, without necessarily focusing on the discrimination issue initially. That's a good idea. And if you want, I can recommend some companies that do this type of training. It won't solve all the problems at once, but it's a first step. Marcus spent the next 15 minutes talking with Charles, sharing resources, strategies, and encouragement. When the young man finally said goodbye, he was visibly more confident and determined. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. You can't imagine how much this conversation meant to me. I think I can, Charles, and if you need more guidance, feel free to reach out. Change is easier when we don't face it alone. As Charles walked away, Marcus reflected on how his story had created ripples that continued to spread. Every person inspired by his transformation had the potential to inspire others, creating a multiplier effect of positive change. This was, Marcus realized, the true mark of impactful leadership, not just transforming your own organization, but inspiring other people to transform their own spheres of influence. At the end of the day, as the store prepared to close, Marcus gathered all the employees for the daily closing meeting, a tradition he had implemented as part of the cultural changes. How was your day? He asked. Very good, Rachel answered. I helped a family looking for clothes for a graduation. Initially, they seemed intimidated by the store's environment, but when they realized they were genuinely welcome, they were very happy and bought several pieces. Excellent, Marcus praised. And you, David? I helped an older gentleman who was having difficulty walking. He wanted to buy a gift for his wife, but was embarrassed about using a cane. I talked with him, reassured him, and in the end, he left with a beautiful gift and a smile on his face. Perfect. Those are exactly the experiences we want to create. Marcus continued listening to similar reports from other employees. Each story reaffirmed that the transformation hadn't been just superficial, it had become part of the store's identity and the people who worked there. There's something I want to share with you, Marcus said when everyone had finished speaking. Today I spoke with a young employee from another store who was inspired by our story to make changes in his own workplace. Really? Grace Williams asked. Yes, and it made me realize that the impact of what we've done here goes far beyond this store. You are inspiring changes in other places, other people, other organizations. Marcus looked around at all the employees. I want you to understand that you are more than store employees. You are ambassadors of a better way to treat people. You are living proof that change is possible. They are proof that when people genuinely commit to doing good, amazing things can happen. This is a great responsibility, William observed. It is, William, but it's also a great privilege. How many people have the opportunity to make a real difference in other people's lives every day? That's true, Jennifer agreed. I had never thought about my work that way before. And that's how I want you all to think from now on, not just as salespeople, security guards, or managers, but as people who have the daily opportunity to make the world a little better, one interaction at a time. The meeting ended with all employees feeling inspired and proud of the work they did. Marcus realized that creating purpose and meaning in people's work was as important as any policy or procedure. In the following months, the Royal Elegance store continued to thrive and serve as a model for other organizations. Marcus received invitations to speak at universities, business conferences, and events about diversity and inclusion. But regardless of how recognized his story became, Marcus never forgot the fundamental lessons he had learned: humility, empathy, and the importance of never stopping questioning and improving. In one of his most memorable speeches at a university in New York, a student asked, "Mr. Marcus, what would you say to leaders who argue they don't have time to worry about social issues because they need to focus on results?" Marcus smiled, as it was a question he heard frequently. I would say those leaders are operating based on a false dichotomy. They believe they have to choose between doing good and having good results, but that choice doesn't exist. How so? In my experience, organizations that treat people with respect and dignity consistently outperform organizations that don't. They have more engaged employees, more loyal customers, a better reputation, and lower turnover. But what about the cost of training, the changes? It's an investment, not a cost, and the return on that investment is measurable. Fewer legal problems, less internal conflict, more innovation, a better work environment, and yes, better financial results. So you don't see a conflict between ethics and profit? I don't. In fact, I see synergy. Ethical companies tend to be more profitable in the long run because they build real sustainability, not just short-term growth. Marcus continued the presentation, explaining how to measure the impact of inclusive practices on business results, using data from his own company as an example. After the speech, a professor approached him. "Mr. Marcus, I'm a business administration professor here at the university. I would like to know if you would be willing to create a case study about your experience for us to use with our students." "It would be an honor," Marcus replied. "The more people can learn from my experience, the better." In the following years, Marcus's story became a widely used case study in business schools in the United States and abroad. Thousands of future leaders learned about leadership, diversity, and organizational change through his experience. Many of these students, when they became leaders in their own organizations, implemented similar principles from the start, creating a new generation of companies built on foundations of inclusion and respect. Marcus also established a foundation to promote diversity and inclusion in the American business sector. The foundation offered free training for small businesses, scholarships for students from marginalized communities, and research on best practices in corporate inclusion. One of the foundation's most successful programs was the Reality Test for Leaders, a program where executives voluntarily underwent experiences similar to what Marcus had lived through to develop empathy and understanding about discrimination. The results of these tests were consistently transformative. Leaders who participated reported profound changes in their perspectives and management practices. In a program evaluation after 5 years, 94% of participants had implemented significant changes in their organizations, resulting in more inclusive and diverse work environments. Marcus often reflected on how a single terrible day had transformed into a force for positive change that spread far beyond what he could have imagined. He understood that his experience had been just the catalyst. The true change had come from the willingness of thousands of people to question their own prejudices and work to be better. In an interview for a business magazine, 5 years after the initial transformation, the journalist asked, "Mr. Marcus, looking back, is there anything you would do differently?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "Honestly, I wish I had awakened to these issues much sooner. I wish I hadn't needed to be humiliated to understand the reality of discrimination. I wish I had been a more attentive and aware leader from the start." "But you don't regret taking the test?" "Not at all. It was painful, but it was necessary. And the results, not just for my company, but for all the people who were inspired to make similar changes, completely justified the initial discomfort." What advice would you give to other leaders? Don't wait to be forced to face reality like I was. Actively seek to understand how your organizations really function. Step out of your executive offices. Talk to employees at all levels. Observe how different types of customers are treated. And if they discover problems? Celebrate. Because identified problems are problems that can be solved. The real danger lies in the problems that exist, but that you don't know exist. This interview became one of the magazine's most shared, inspiring even more leaders to critically examine their own organizations. Marcus also kept in regular contact with many of the employees who had gone through the transformation with him. Grace Williams had become not just a colleague, but a close friend whose perspectives he valued enormously. William had become a respected speaker on personal change and professional redemption. His story of transformation from someone who perpetuated discrimination to someone who actively fought it resonated with many people who recognized their own biases. Rachel, Jennifer, and Sarah had all grown professionally within the company, assuming leadership positions in different stores in the chain. They were often consulted by other retailers who wanted to implement similar changes. David and Michael had become security trainers, teaching other security personnel to treat all people with respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance. Each of them carried with them the lessons learned during that period of transformation and continued to apply them in their personal and professional lives. 10 years after the initial incident, Marcus decided to conduct one final experiment. He disguised himself again as a homeless person, but this time visited several competing stores in the same mall to see how the industry had changed. The results were mixed. Some stores had clearly implemented more inclusive policies, likely inspired by Marcus's story. Other stores maintained discriminatory practices, similar to those his own store had practiced in the past. This reaffirmed for Marcus that social change is a gradual and uneven process, but that every organization that chooses to do the right thing contributes to collective progress. In his store, however, the contrast was notable. New employees, many of whom had been hired years after the initial transformation, naturally displayed inclusive behaviors because they had been trained in a culture where this was the norm, not the exception. Marcus realized he had created something sustainable, an organizational culture that perpetuated itself regardless of the presence of specific individuals. In a final reflection on his journey, Marcus wrote in his diary, "Today marks 10 years since I disguised myself as a homeless person and discovered painful truths about my company and about myself. It was the beginning of a journey that changed not only my store, but my entire life. I learned that real leadership is not about title or power. It's about responsibility. Responsibility for creating environments where all people can flourish. Responsibility for continuously questioning our own biases. Responsibility for using our influence to build a fairer and more inclusive world. I learned that change is possible, but it requires courage. Courage to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our organizations. Courage to make difficult changes, even when there is resistance. Courage to uphold our values, even when there is pressure to compromise them. I learned that true success is not measured only in financial numbers, but in the positive impact we have on people's lives, and that when we do the right thing, financial results usually follow naturally. Most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to change, to grow, to become a better version of oneself, and that when we have the courage to make that change, we inspire others to do the same, creating waves of positive transformation that spread far beyond what we can see. My journey of personal and professional growth is far from over. I continue learning, questioning, improving, and I hope to continue inspiring others to do the same, because I believe that together we can create a world where all people are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. End of story. Now tell me, dear listener, what did you think of this transformation story? Do you believe such profound changes are truly possible in real life? Share your opinion in the comments. Your sincere words are very important to us. If you know someone who might be inspired by this story, be sure to share it. And if you've made it this far, don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories that might touch your heart. Thank you very much for your company.